the censure declaration took 11 minutes to read aloud. I know because I counted. I had nothing else to do from the gallery, no brief to consult, no aide whispering updates, no secondary screen scrolling the procedural record. My role that morning was witness, and witnesses do not act, they absorb. So I sat in the upper tier of the Velhari Senate's grand deliberative floor, and I watched Delegate Emeritus Sorath of the Velhari Supremacy stand at the central lectern and unspool, in measured high compact syllables, 11 minutes of formal threat. The Velhari Interstellar Senate was the oldest standing assembly in the Outer Compact. It had, by its own published record, resolved 43 territorial disputes, negotiated the end of 2 interstellar wars, and expelled 4 member species across its 400-year history. The chamber reflected that self-regard, a vast hemisphere of pale stone and dark glass. 7 tiered arcs of seating arranged so that every delegate faced every other delegate, and at the center, a single raised lectern where the speaker of the moment became, briefly, the axis of the known political world. The acoustics were designed to make every word feel like judgment. Sorath used them well. His voice carried the censure declaration's every clause with the unhurried gravity of someone who had never been told no by anything that mattered. The declaration named 3 frontier systems, Ardith, the call margin, and the binary pair the Senate's charts called Kolvar secondary, and stated the full procedural weight of a 7-species consensus vote, that humanity's presence in those systems constituted unlawful territorial expansion under Article 14 of the Outer Compact Charter. It demanded full withdrawal within 60 standard days. It noted that failure to comply would authorize the combined Senate response fleet, some 400 vessels, a number Sorath did not need to specify because everyone in the chamber already knew it, to enforce the withdrawal by other means. He finished. The chamber held the silence that follows a thing said with full institutional conviction. Our delegation sat at the human table on the floor below me. 3 people, Senior Delegate Marin Voss in the center, 2 attachés flanking her, no aides, no secondary counsel. Voss had been in this building before. She had negotiated the Kolvar transit rights 9 years ago, the Ardith Survey Compact 6 years after that. She knew the acoustics. She knew what 11 minutes of deliberate Senate language was designed to make a human feel. She laughed. Not a performance. Not a calculated display of contempt deployed for the gallery's benefit. I know the difference. I have watched enough diplomatic theater to recognize the manufactured reaction. The timed scoff, the strategic smile, was not that. This was the laugh of a person who has just heard something read aloud that she has known, privately for some time, and the gap between what the Senate believed it was saying and what was actually true had finally become, in that moment, audible. It was quiet. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds. Her hand came up to her mouth and then came back down. The chamber did not know what to do with it. Sorath's prepared response for human objection was a secondary motion, already drafted, that would have moved the declaration to binding arbitration. He had no prepared response for laughter. Neither did the 6 presiding delegates seated in the senior arc above him. I watched 2 of them exchange a look. The specific look of people who have built a structure they were confident in, and have just seen the foundation shift. Voss reached into the document folio in front of her. She removed a single folded page. She placed it on the table. She did not stand. She did not explain. She left it there, folded, in the center of the human table, folded her hands on top of it, in a way that invited the chamber to come to it, rather than the other way around. The Senate's clerk, a young Velhari functionary, whose job that morning had been the simplest one in the building, crossed to the table, collected the document with both hands in the formal receiving posture, and carried it to the presiding panel. I watched the 5 presiding delegates read it in sequence. The first finished and set it down. The second picked it up. The third took slightly longer than the others. The 4th passed it without reading all the way to the end, which told me something. The 5th read it twice. It was, as I learned later from the copy filed with the Compact Secretariat, a ratification notice, specifically, the founding instrument of the Call Margin Mutual Defense and Habitation Compact, executed 91 days prior, signed by 11 species, none of them human, though humanity had written the charter and held the founding seat, formally transferring joint, administrative sovereignty over Ardith, the call margin, and Kolvar secondary from individual claimant status to collective compact governance. The three systems the Velhari Senate had just demanded humanity vacate were no longer human territories. They had not been for 3 months. They were now the sovereign commons of a compact that had its own charter, its own membership, and its own standing under outer compact law. A compact in which human administrative presence was a founding provision, not a territorial claim. The Senate's ultimatum had been addressed to a fact that no longer existed. Sorath was still at the lectern. He had not moved. His prepared secondary motion was in his left hand, the physical draft, and I watched him hold it through the entire time the presiding panel was reading, and I watched him. When the fifth delegate set the document down and looked up at the chamber, fold the motion once along its center seam and place it on the lectern's lower shelf. He did not look at it again. Presiding delegate who spoke, the senior of the five, a Velhari woman named conclave speaker Aerith Yan, who had been in deliberative office longer than anyone else on the panel, asked one question. She directed it at the human table, formally, through the chamber address system. She asked Pon when the founding compact had been executed. Voss looked up. 91 days ago, she said. Filed notice with the Secretariat at the time. The receipt is in the document's appendix. Jan looked down. She found the appendix. She read the date on the Secretariat receipt. She set the document down again. She did not ask a second question. Is a particular silence a body makes when it understands, simultaneously, that the move it spent months constructing has landed on a board where the relevant pieces have already been relocated. It is not the silence of shock. It is something more considered than that, something closer to a collective recalibration, a room full of experienced political minds, each privately reordering their understanding of how much time the other side had been running a parallel track. The Velhari Senate had 400 years of institutional gravity. It had, in its lifetime, watched species beg at that central lectern. It had issued ultimatums that were answered with compliance, with protest, with counter-ultimatums. It had a prepared response for most things. It sat with Marin Voss's quiet 3-second laugh for a long time. The session adjourned without a secondary vote. The censure declaration was, by operation of compact law, moot. You cannot compel withdrawal from a territory whose governance has already been lawfully transferred to a multilateral body. No fleet authorization followed. The 400 vessels Sorath had not needed to name remained in their home berths. I collected my things from the gallery bench and made my way down to the floor to meet Voss as she was closing the document folio. 2 attachés were already moving toward the exit. I asked her, because I had been in that gallery for 11 minutes of deliberate Senate, language, and 3 seconds of quiet laughter, and I needed to know when she had understood that the censure motion was coming. She picked up the folio. She considered the question. Before we filed the compact, she said. She walked towards the exit. I followed. Behind us, the Velhari Senate's chamber held its 400-year-old silence, and somewhere in its senior arc, 5 presiding delegates were beginning the careful work of deciding what exactly they were going to say had happened here. That was not our problem. We had already built something. People who have already built something do not spend a great deal of time worrying about how the people who tried to stop them are going to explain it.